Hello, everyone, and welcome to the next episode of the Crawley Town Supporters Alliance Simply Reds podcast. My name is Reuben, and as always, I'm joined by Louie. You doing all right, Louie?
Good evening, Reuben. Yeah, I'm good, thank you. How are you doing?
Yes, I'm not doing too badly, thank you. And of course, welcome back, Bradley. You doing all right?
I'm good, thanks for having me back.
That's all right. That's all right. Well, I think let's just jump straight into it. Elephant in the room. This morning, or at least for me, it was this morning on the Monday morning. I woke up to the news that Scott Lindsey had left the club. I think it was announced 5 minutes to 11 on Sunday night. So
Something
really
like
strange, really strange timing. But yeah, I mean, I think overall people aren't surprised entirely about Scott going. I think some people probably argue that it's probably a bit too late and thought he might have gone a bit sooner. But yeah, Bradley, what are your thoughts?
Well, look, I mean, you touch on it there, right? So first of all, I've never known a fan base be quite so divided on should we keep someone, should we not keep someone. Look, I'm going to place on record, right? I think Scott's a great guy. Every conversation I've ever had with him is fantastic. What he did in his first spell gave my son the love of football that we now share. I'll forever be grateful for that. I was over the moon when he came back last year, and we came so close. But that said, the football this year has been pretty poor, and I don't know too many clubs that would leave a manager in place with one win in 12. This is a results business, and unfortunately, the teams below us have started getting better, and I think that's kind of forced the hand. Bit like you, Reuben, I thought the timing of the announcement was a bit strange. If there was a decision to be made, I would have expected a ready-made replacement ready to go, which makes me wonder what's driven this decision and why now, and what's the logic behind Neil Smith going but Jamie Day staying. That for me as a fan, why would you sack one of his assistants but not the other?
Yeah, that's very true.
Strange.
I would expect, just on that point, I think it is a similar situation when in that sort of 2 days between Rob Elliott and Scott Lindsey coming back, Rob Elliott being sacked and Scott Lindsey coming back this time last year, where not all of Rob Elliott's staff were let go initially. One of the, I can't remember who it was at the time. Was it
Louis Story stayed.
Louis Story, yeah. Louis Story was kind of in charge of training for a day or so. He even did the media for one of the
and that
for the Bristol
that to
Rovers
me,
game.
Louis is really
So
strange.
maybe it's a similar situation, but
because look, we're not a Premier League club, we're not a Championship club, we're not blessed with a massive coaching staff, right? So why have we taken the decision to remove one assistant but not the other is a strange one to me. Normally people go and their staff stay and oversee an interim period, or they all go. So that I thought that was strange. Look, at the same time, I was at the Borehamwood game that Neil was in charge of because Scott was in the stands, and that didn't go well. So I wouldn't necessarily say he'd be an obvious choice to put in interim charge. But it just seems strange to me because we don't have that sort of Ben Gladwin figure like we did before to kind of step into that role and do those things.
Yeah. Just reading the club statement from Sunday, and as that newspaper called The Sun pointed out, it's 107 words because that was the headline for this news. But the work is to appoint a new manager is already underway and will make a statement on the matter in due course. So I don't know if players are training today or Monday, But whether somebody like Scott Malone might have been, well, we've got Jamie Day, but whether Scott Malone might have been helping. But he's the only real player that I could probably see kind of taking a role in the kind of coaching / management side of things.
We don't have that, for want of a better term, that old pro, right? That's been around, that kind of Ben Gladwin, Danny Bullman did it years ago as well, right? So to kind of step into that breach, and I just think we're still in a period at the moment where games are coming, thick and fast, and before we know it, Saturday will be here. So if someone's coming in and they need time to develop a system, a style of play, whatever, I would always like to think, and I'm sure it's not feasible, but you'd always have someone ready to go if you're gonna pull that trigger, right?
Yeah, I mean, the mark of a well-run club is that they will have that in place, regardless of if the manager's doing well. If the manager's doing badly, they will have a short list of managers who they think will be a good manager for when the time comes for the current manager to leave. And I think that's probably not necessarily something I would expect us to have in place. I think,
especially given how this season's gone, right?
Yeah.
Like this isn't. We had a great start to the season, and suddenly we're on a 12-game winless run, and let's pull the trigger. It's not been great all season, and I know they backed Scott massively in January. I've been to every home game and a few away games since January, and I've got to be honest and say the football's not got a whole lot better. So you would think there needs to be some semblance of a succession plan in place, right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, just looking at his kind of win percentages according to FootMob, I don't quite know what games and stuff they take into account. But I mean, he has 15% win percentage.
Yeah, I think on the results, they've obviously been appalling. If you look at the games we've actually won this season, we've beaten Harrogate twice. We've beaten Barrow once, beaten Bristol Rovers when Bristol Rovers were at their very, very lowest, and that was a 10-man Bristol Rovers. I mean, you can go on. The games we've won, we haven't. If you look at the actual games we've won, it's not a particularly impressive set of scalps, but I do think we've been a bit unlucky at points this season as well. I do think there's an element of there's so many games we banged on about it all season where we've deserved a little bit more. We haven't taken our chances, and obviously that is the nature of football. You're not going to win every game you deserve, so you're not going to take every single one of your chances. But for me, there is an element of even if in 20% of those games, if we'd have got what we deserved, we'd be 8-10 points clear. Almost like you can point to so many games, you can point to so many drop points in a similar way to last season. And it's so for me. I'm genuinely kind of a bit confused about how I feel about it, whether it's the right thing, because on the surface, yeah, the results have been appalling and they speak for themselves, but the performances have probably deserved a fair bit more. I'm not going to sit here and say we've been great, especially over the last couple of months. I think we've been worse than we were in the first half of the season, performance-wise, for whatever reason. I think injuries have also been a big factor. You look at our midfield, we've had Max Anderson with a couple of long-term injuries. Louis Copley's come in, and we barely see anything of him because of his injuries. Jay missed the last chunk of the season earlier on. The injury situation hasn't helped, particularly defensively as well. There's a lot of reasons. It's never just because of one thing. It's never because of the manager. I don't think changing the manager is the be-all and end-all. It's going to solve all of our problems. I think there's so much more that goes into it than that. And so I kind of on the fence about how I feel.
But you made a couple of really good points, Louis. And I agree with you. There's a real on-the-fence vibe about the whole thing. A few things I would say to kind of counter that are yes, we've been unlucky, but I don't think we've been anywhere near creative enough this season. Particularly since Orsie's come back. I mean, he spends more time in midfield than he does up front. Injuries, yes, we've had some really big injuries, long-term injuries, but then the decision to let Radcliffe go out on loan and then have defensive injuries, to me, is a strange one. So there's a lot of, and I agree. I don't like the mentality of changing the manager, and I don't like the idea of Scott not being part of Crawley Town, but I also think he just keeps picking the same team and trying to shoehorn people into positions they're not naturally in, and create a team and a formation to fit the players he wanted to bring in, and it's not working. And to keep doing the same thing and expect a different result is the definition of madness, right? And it feels like that at times. Like, we've got to get these players into the team. We've got to get these players into the squad. So we'll just play whatever formation it kind of comes in.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the team has been really unbalanced. The last few, it feels like we've got no one connecting the midfield. Jay's doing his bits off the ball and winning the ball back. But there's no Liam Kelly type next to him to kind of get us going, get us playing forward, which I think is a big reason why Orsi and Lolos in particular have struggled, because they're not getting the ball in areas where they can affect the game. And, Remember, results are just playing out wide, where, you can only create so many chances from crosses. It's not necessarily, especially, it feels very disjointed going forward in a way that it didn't.
Take the Barnet game, right? That Kellen Gordon ran down the wing back, whatever. For the first half, he was unbelievable, and he must have put 6 or 7 crosses into the box, and there's no one in the box. Now, somewhere along the line, he's being told, your job is to run down the line and get crosses into the box, but then someone else is not being told, be in the box for those crosses, right? So, it's fruitless. And then what happens is, if we're not going to attack those balls in the box, it's just a turnover.
Yeah.
And then a counter-attack.
Yeah, it feels that I think there's an element of frustration. I think the performances since, with a few exceptions, I think there have been some good performances recently. The Swindon game comes to mind. We were good at Walsall. We were exceptional at Walsall and deserved so much more there. MK Dons. I mean, there's another part of me that's kind of made me think that I don't think the players weren't fighting. I don't think this is a team that had given up on the manager, or a manager that had lost the dressing room, which is why it feels a little. And there's something about it, and kind of what you touched on, the way the statement was worded, the timing of the announcement, the fact that Scott, in his pre-Fleetwood media, was saying, the players are really confident. They feel like they're in every game. They feel like they can go the rest of the season without losing. He was very bullish, and he looked the happiest I kind of you've sort of seen him sort of pre or post match for a while. He looked very, he looked like he was chomping at the bit almost. And Jay's comments after the Fleetwood game, where he said, "Look, the manager's given us a platform and we're not delivering." It didn't seem like the players, and the fact we've got all these last minute goals recently. Something that maybe we'll never know, but something seems to have very suddenly changed on Sunday. And I don't know if it's because the owners have panicked. I don't know if it's because there's been a conversation where they've just agreed to part ways. They've agreed that there's nothing left for them to try with Scott. There's nothing more that Scott can do. I don't know what it is, but it doesn't feel like a decision that was made with a lot of confidence or a lot of conviction, I think is what I'm saying. It feels like a decision that's perhaps been forced upon the owners in a way that they wouldn't have wanted.
And I would agree with you. I don't think the players lack fight, right? I don't think that's necessarily an issue. There was there was a comment on Facebook in one of the supporters group at the weekend, reporting to BJ Williams' dad, saying, you know, my son will fight for this club and this badge, and he'll leave everything on the line, right? And I don't doubt that for a minute. We lack quality, right? And I think that's an issue, and you know, rightly or wrongly, you know, we let a lot of these players go after the promotion campaign. Maybe, you know, that was just the season of their lives, and it was, you know, just to play devil's advocate, it was right to cash in on them because they would never have been worth that amount of money again, ever. And, you know, suddenly we just seem to lack quality. And it is that, you know, the transition through midfield doesn't work. And when that doesn't work, we go long. That's not Orsie's game. It was never Orsie's game. And yes, you know, Lolos is a big guy, but again, he's not a target man.
No, he wants the ball to feed. He wants to take players on.
He's a technically gifted footballer, right? That was what he was always good at. And again, it's, you know, this when and where the frustration sometimes comes in the stands is, you know, it can be 75, 80 minutes gone, and we're losing, and we stick to the game plan and we keep doing the same things we've been doing for 80 minutes in the hope that something changes. And, you know, we're not necessarily blessed with the quality coming off the bench to sort of really change the game at the moment. But, like you say, has a conversation taken place where they've lost faith in his ability to turn things around? Or, you know, I suppose for the most part, they're watching what we're watching every week, right? And everyone's an armchair critic.
I think it's important at this kind of stage of the season, and actually what's on the line for Crawley. Like, if we were to come out of the Football League, which we've been in for about 14, 15 years now,
15 years,
it's going to have huge effects. Like Jay Williams said in his post-match interview after Fleetwood, that like people lose their jobs as a result of this. The size of Crawley are going to struggle to get out of the National League and back into the Football League.
There's huge teams down there.
I said it earlier in the season when we were struggling after the first sort of 4 or 5 games. I think it was around the time when we lost at Crewe, or maybe the after. And I said then people began to realise there's going to be a long season, that relegation wasn't out of the question. And I said, look, if we get relegated, we will never come back up. We look at the sides that have gone down. Look at your Southend, much bigger club than us. York, much bigger club. You know, there's so many teams. You know, teams like Barnet who go down and come back up are the exception. You know, look at teams like Torquay and Yeovil, because that's without being
Yeovil,
we are more likely to go down again than we are to have any chance of fighting at the top of the National League next season. So,
I mean, look, the only benchmark we've got this season as well, and I know we've changed a lot of the team since then. Boreham Wood absolutely played us off the park, right? And they are, you know, they're the top end of the National League, and we were the bottom end of League Two. So there's not a huge gulf in quality, but they absolutely played us off the park. They bullied us. You look at a club the size of Wrexham and what it actually took to get them out of the National League, right? Like, I don't think a Hollywood movie star's going to come along and buy Crawley and bankroll us to the Championship anytime soon. It'd be nice, but you know, that's what it took, and it, you know, Wrexham very nearly went to the wall, right, because they were down there for so long. And you've sort of seen, like you say, Torquay, Hartlepool. I mean, not that long ago, Yeovil were in the Championship under Gary Johnson, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So, I think, look, I guess the flip side is if we stay up they made the right choice, and if we were to go down, touch wood we don't, they would still argue they made the right choice because they gave it a go. And I don't like this term, but I genuinely feel like at the moment we are just sleepwalking towards relegation. And we can't change the players now.
No, it's for me it's a strange one because we'd almost never know if it was the right decision because we could stay up by a couple of points, and the argument is, well, we were only a point above the relegation zone when we sacked Scott. If Scott was sacked, or I'm presuming he didn't resign, but it's not like last season where under Rob it was unfortunately unequivocally clear that we were sinking without a trace, and Scott came in and there was a marked improvement in the performances and results. This time around, I
would argue this season,
unless there is a massive improvement, but if we could scrape 8 or 9 points in the next 7 games, we could stay up by a point, and you could argue actually nothing changed, and we might as well have not bothered with sacking Scott, and we might as well have given him a summer to get his house in order.
We've been saying that for weeks, Louis.
Yeah, but I'm not saying that would have been the right thing, but you could make the argument that if we stay up by a point or two, it's made 100%. Very little material difference. And I think there's also an argument that, and this is something that I do kind of subscribe to, not everyone will, but changing the manager often changes very little. I know last season we saw how it can change things, but we've also seen how it in the past how it changes little often. There's plenty of examples of clubs who change managers and they continue to flounder. And it's often about the environment that the manager goes into. And whoever comes in now will be coming into an environment where the players are low on confidence. They're not particularly good. The fans aren't particularly happy. We're on a terrible run of form in terms of no wins in 10 games or whatever it is. It feels like a gamble. It feels like an uncalculated kind of gamble that there's no guarantee it works. There's no guarantee that anyone's going to come in and get a tune out of these players.
I would say
more often than not it fails.
Is worse than Rob Elliott, and that was bad.
I would say I don't. Because I often thought, until the last few games under Rob, I always thought there was something there. You could see there was passages where we played really well. There's games where we played really well for periods. There's games where we were quite unlucky. But ultimately,
very stubborn though, wasn't it?
Well, I think a lot of managers probably are. A lot of managers, I think, I often find that when managers often have a way of doing things in a style of play, but they stick to it 'cause it's what they know best and it's what they know how to coach, particularly at this level. But yeah, I think that last season the squad simply just wasn't quite good enough. And I think this season the squad should have been good enough. We came down off the back of a really good run of form under Scott. We didn't need to. I didn't think we needed to change much in the summer based on that simple logic.
I didn't.
The other side that took however many points from 12 games, it was playoff level form.
I thought Barker was brilliant last year. Flint was brilliant last year.
Yeah, and I think last year when we brought Scott in, almost to the year of the day he's been sacked, I think Scott was definitely the best choice the club could have made in bringing in a new manager. Not probably not necessarily for his managerial ability, but he just brought everyone together. I think that's what we're missing. We always need Scott Lindsey to come in again now and bring everyone back together. I think it kind of we're now so far apart from being a together club that actually it's going to be difficult to improve the atmosphere around the club.
That's the biggest thing for me, that you make a great point there, Reuben, and I've had this conversation, is I've been on the fence. Does he go? Does he stay? I'm of the mindset, I don't know what else there is out there that's better for the club. But at the same time, the statement is ambiguous, right? All it says is that they've come to some resolution, and I can only assume he's sat down at some stage with his employers and they've gone, look, this is poor, right? And something's got to change. What can we do differently? And maybe the answer is, I don't know, right? I've tried everything I can, and if that's the answer and we're still not getting the results, then physically the only thing that can change right now is the manager. I'm with you. Sometimes a different voice makes a difference. I don't know, we don't have those sort of cult heroes in our history that can come in and galvanise the club like some of the bigger teams. But you never know, right? Scott came in as a relative unknown once upon a time and did a good job. So, hopefully whatever comes next is better. Right now, I'd take staying up by a point, right? It's still a bit closer.
No, definitely.
I think,
and,
Sorry, go on.
We asked on our Twitter, was it the right decision to sack Scott at this point in the season? 67% of people said yes, 33% said no.
That feels about right from sort of the comments and the general, I don't like the word, but the general vibe in the terrace that I've noted over the last few... and it really has been the last few games that I think it's really turned. It wasn't that many games ago that people were still singing Super Scott Lindsey. It wasn't... It's not even a month, or maybe a month ago people were singing that.
But there have also been instances this season where, he's got into it a bit with the fans.
Yeah, and I mean, without knowing what was said to kind of make him react like that, I often think fans act like they have a right to say what they want to managers and players without them having a right of reply. And then when they do reply, when it's seen as some sort of war crime. Yeah, I think Scott's obviously been quite edgy this season, particularly, if you think about, was it Cheltenham away, where I think there was an argument. There's been a couple of occasions. There's been a couple of occasions at home games as well.
He's historically been somebody that's always kind of gone along the route of, he wasn't happy after Swansea because the fans booed Harry McCurdy, and he made a point of it. There's been a few instances this season where he's complained about that, and historically he's been somebody that goes, look, they pay their money, they're entitled to their opinion, right? And it has felt a little fractured. I don't think he has been the galvanising influence this season that he was last year or in his previous spell.
Yeah, I would agree. I think he's that almost. I remember in his first spell in charge. I think it might have been after our first game in League One. I remember saying to my dad, and I probably put it on Twitter as well, I'd run through brick walls for Scott Lindsey, and I think a lot of fans would have said similar.
100%.
And I think he'd lost that sort of dragging everyone along with him. That kind of, I would lay everything on the line for him.
Yeah.
And sometimes the magic runs out, and it's
happened to Mourinho at Chelsea.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, it's happened to the very best. It happened to Wenger at Arsenal. It's happened to the very best managers that we've seen. So
yeah,
it is ultimately football managers. They, especially for a club like us, it either ends one way or the other. They either get poached or they get sacked because things go wrong. And we've seen it. We've seen both outcomes with Scott, unfortunately. Ultimately, I think it's hard not to feel just pretty sad about how it's ended. It should never. I feel like for Scott, it should never have ended like this. It's a real shame. He and perhaps that's why I'm a little on the fence, and I probably wouldn't have. I can't fully agree with the decision because I do just think it's a shame, and I do think it's the sentimental fan in me just finds it very hard to have any sort of positivity or take any joy in a man who gave us such a great season, who took us into League One, who genuinely did have such a good bond with the fans and did care for the club deeply. I find it very hard to reconcile that with him being sacked and my feelings towards him as a manager.
I spoke to him at the services on the way back from Swansea. The team coach came in and he was very gracious, and he spent a lot of time talking to me and my lad, and he said that the reason he came back this is his club. This is the club that he felt like he wanted to be at. divulged some of the reasons that he chose to leave and go to MK Dons, and he also divulged the reasons that he then came back, right? And it's a shame. I agree with you. It's not nice that it's ended the way it's ended. At the same time, you know, I don't think it's ended in a way where he wouldn't be welcome back at the club.
Yeah.
I still think they should paint some kind of mural to the playoff victory on the stadium. And look, he goes down in folklore, and I don't doubt for 1 minute that he has got up every day for the last year and done his absolute best and worked as hard as he can for the club. But we all know in any walk of life, sometimes that's just not enough, right? And unfortunately, football's a results business, and like you say, if you can't lift those players, if you can't lift that mood and try and build that confidence back into them, then eventually something's got to give. And I just don't know, I just don't know what else could give right now to give us a chance of staying out.
Yeah,
like I say, I still think, I'm still yet to see a name mentioned that I think is better than Scott Lindsey, or
that is the other half
gives
of
us
it.
a chance.
That is the other half of it. I was talking to my dad earlier and talking to my uncle as well, and I was just saying to them both, it's only half the equation sacking the manager. You can call for the manager to be sacked all you want, and that might be the correct course of action, but it's only half of it. You still got to bring in the right man. This is where a lot of teams fail. This is why it's not as simple as sack the manager, everything's going to turn around. I think a lot of people do oversimplify and get lost in that. So
before we jump into kind of what the future looks like, and Louis, I think you mentioned it nicely, the fact that it is important to remember all the stuff that Scott's actually done for us, and has undoubtedly given us memories of going to Wembley, getting promoted, which never in a million years did probably Crawley fans think we'd get to that point. And so hopefully that kind of this spell doesn't kind of tarnish what has happened in the past, and that he is able to be remembered for that first season rather than the second spell. Because I think everyone's kind of disappointed with how it's ended. I think, yes, it's now important that we kind of begin to look forward to some 7 games now, which are probably the biggest 7 games of our lives.
We were talking about that earlier, weren't we? I made a comment in our podcast group chat about this being probably the most crucial part. And then Luke very quickly said, "Well, we were here a couple of years ago, weren't we? Or 3 years ago now." But
we were. So Louis, I put you on the spot then. You're the Khalili brothers. Who are you picking as your next manager?
Adam Hinshelwood. I think he's probably attainable, almost definitely affordable, and I don't think there's a better manager in the non-league. And I don't necessarily. I never subscribe to the whole. You need football league experience. You need Scott had when he came in had maybe 6 months of managing in the football league. We've got football league. It doesn't. We've had managers who've had football league experience, and they've been awful. It's not a guarantee of anything. We could get Darryl Clark in, and it wouldn't be a good appointment, for example. He's got 2 promotions in the football league, so it's I'm sort of preempting what I know would be a response to getting a non-league manager in by saying that, but I would go for Adam Hinshelwood. I know he's not managed. He's only managed 1 season in the National League, and that's the highest level he's managed at. But I do genuinely believe he is. He'll be managing in the football league sooner or later. Whether that's probably won't be with Worthing, but it'll be in the not too distant future. So we might as well. He's a local man. He's a local. He's got a lot of managerial experience. He's been managing for about 7-8 seasons now, I think it is. Did a relatively good job at York and was probably unfairly sacked. And has done 2 great jobs in different spells at Worthing. Would probably be a good stylistic fit for the kind of football we want to play. I think if you're looking for it does. I know we just before we started recording, or no, actually it was again earlier we were talking about this, and I think Luke said that appointment would feel a bit Rob Elliott. I do get that, it's relatively untried and untested, but that for me would be the most, not ambitious, but it would actually be the most forward-thinking appointment. Not just, and there's an element of short-termism, and we get just someone who can do a job for seven games before we rebuild in the summer. But that would be who I would go for in the long term, at least.
I mean, looking at the National League South table, I can't see him coming to Crawley at this point. Because, I mean, Worthing could be playing Crawley next season in the National League. They're currently second, 6 points from first.
Yeah. I mean, the good thing is we could be playing Dorking and Worthing next season. So if we do get relegated, and I would much rather we didn't, obviously, but at least there'll be some more local away games. We won't be trekking to Barrow or Accrington. No disrespect to Barrow or Accrington, but we'd have a few more local away games.
Are you not going to Newport on the subsidised coach travel?
Well, I can't say I am, but yeah.
So Bradley, who would you go for?
I've got two. So the first one, I think, to your point that you just made about Hinshelwood, would be Luke Garrard at Boreham Wood, but I'm not sure he would want to swap that position he's in at the moment with Boreham Wood for us. But I suppose my left field pick would probably be Darren Ferguson. He's available after leaving Peterborough. He's had a few spells at Peterborough now, and got decent-ish results. I think he's got some experience. We certainly know that he can call on a lot of experience from Dad when it needs it as well. So yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be disappointed to see him turn up, whether that be until the end of the season or whether that be on a more permanent basis. I think Hinshelwood's a great shout. My concern would be, historically we've gone down this route of appointing what are seen as progressive appointments and they've not worked, whether that be Betsy or the Everington disaster or, to a certain degree Rob Elliott. I don't know. I mean, yeah, they would be my picks.
So I've got two cards, probably left wing ones.
But you wouldn't tell us about.
They wouldn't tell you about.
Drum roll.
The first is Jimmy Smith, ex-Crawley. And I think going on to that kind of drumming up support from the fans, I think that
Louie's just Googling him.
Has the potential to do that. Then they have another ex-Crawley, but Simon Rusk, who was manager at Stockport, being involved in Brighton, then was caretaker manager a few times for Southampton as well. So he's my they're both my two out there manager choices, but I think both of them are risks.
Yeah, I mean, has Jimmy Smith been doing any coaching since he retired?
Yeah, so he was part of the Chelsea team,
okay.
youth team, an Ipswich youth team now.
Okay.
So not really kind of any professional teams. That's just youth. So I think Simon Rusk is probably more my go-to if it's between those two.
Yeah, I think and I think the fact that we're coming up with these names, I'm plucking a manager from the National League South, which again I've got no problem with. We have players from the National League South who got us promoted a couple of years ago. I'm not fussed about the level as such. We've gone for two ex-Crawley players. We've gone for Darren Ferguson, who got sacked after leaving Peterborough, bottom of League One in October. I think that's another reason why perhaps this is an odd decision, because there is no obvious replacement. It's not like when we sacked Rob Elliott last year, and there was an obvious replacement, i.e. Scott. and even if it wasn't Scott, there would have been probably one or two other names that we could have got in there. There's just no one obvious. There's no one. I mean, if you search Crawley Town next manager odds, for example,
there are none.
You've got but you've got Bet365. You don't even have any odds at the moment, but they've listed.
No one's got any odds.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm just checking now.
Andy Crosby, no thank you. Michael Appleton, no thank you. Darryl Clark, probably not, and Michael Flynn. Again, not exactly great. He did a decent job at Newport, getting them into the League Two playoff final, but that was maybe 5 years ago now, and hasn't done a whole lot since in terms of he's failed in a couple of jobs since. So the names that are available aren't exactly inspiring, and I think that's kind of to what you were saying, Bradley, earlier about who's going to come in, who's actually out there that's better, and that's got to be part of the equation. When you make these decisions, you've got to think, okay, well, is there actually someone who can come in and realistically do a better job with the resources available? And I've got to say, I think the answer is probably no. Not in the next couple of the 23rd of March. Not in the next 6 weeks.
I think you have two choices. You either appoint a manager now for long term, or you bring in the caretaker manager, like we did with Dean Saunders. Somebody who will just see us until the summer, when probably in the summer that pool of managers will hopefully increase. But I thought we also asked on Twitter who would people bring in as manager. Somebody said Darryl Clark, Matt Sadler, who's been mentioned a couple of times. Somebody's even mentioned Richie Barker.
I mean, is he not?
He's assistant manager at MK.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he's not going to. He's been Paul Warren's assistant for years now. He's not going to suddenly. I don't think he's going to come back to Crawley, given how it ended for him.
Well, I mean, I know you say that, but he has been. Whenever MK aren't playing, he is watching Crawley, and I don't think what's happened in the past between him and Crawley will really matter, just because everyone's changed.
I mean, it was 13 years ago, I suppose, 12 years ago. I guess, yeah. Again, it's an uninspiring pool. I mean, Richie Barker, I always thought quite highly of when he had us in League One, and I don't think he did a particularly bad job at all with us, given sort of the resources available at the time in League One as well. It's very. I keep coming back to it. It's very difficult to find an obvious name who comes in. It's very difficult to. There's no one that jumps out at you.
You look around. I mean, there's not really. I mean, I just had a look at, Mike Williamson, who was at MK Dons, is now coaching at South Shields. He's not even the manager there anymore.
Blimey.
You generally at our level, you get clubs go down the route of, let's bring in Ian Holloway, let's bring in Steve Bruce and Mark Hughes, and sometimes that kind of works, but I don't think we have the lure of sort of Bradford or Swindon, etc. I mean, complete left field. Go get someone like Neil Warnock, right? That knows what it takes to just get out of this, and then, like you say, worry about it come July, in terms of who we bring in and what squad we build, because for the most part the players we brought back in, a lot of those are loan players. They're probably not going to be staying beyond this season. They've not necessarily done enough to earn a contract right now. So I don't know. There's, like I say, there's not a lot out there. So you've either got to convince someone like a Hinchelwood to come in with the view to this would be your project next season, regardless of whatever league we're in. I think my biggest concern at the moment is it doesn't feel like there's a plan in place, and even at the fans forum recently, when they were asked what the plan was if we went down, the owners said there wasn't one. Like, to me, that's just poor business and poor planning, right? Because it could happen, right? Well, yeah, we all want to live in a world where it doesn't. I'm pretty sure there was a comment made last year at, I don't know if it was a fans forum or on a podcast by Ben or what it was. There was very much a plan of if we stayed in League One, and then there was a plan if we didn't then stay in League One, right? Because you have to cut your cloth accordingly, and you have to do the right things. You know, if we go down, the day after you go down, you've got to start making those changes, and even to the degree, like you said, Louis, you know, unfortunately, if that happens, people will lose their jobs, right? Attendances would drop. We wouldn't need as many stewards. You know, all of those sort of things, that needs to be planned out, and that needs to be, you know, ready to go, as well as this is going to be the person that's leading that project, you know, and these are the sort of players that we're going to have. And, you know, like most football clubs, I'm sure there are players that are out of contract in the summer, right? So who of those do we keep? Who of those do we not keep, etc.?
Yeah, I think there's, to that point, he said about, you know, if we, for example, went for Hinchelwood, it is his job regardless of whether we stay up or go down. In the same way that it was Scott's job when he came back in last season, regardless of whether he was going to be in League One or League Two. Obviously, the context is different. You know, Crawley Town getting relegated from League One. Obviously, we were all gutted, but it's not a disaster. It's not, you know, it's not something that we can't bounce back from. Crawley Town getting relegated from League Two is a whole nother level of, you know, like you say, money coming in, less of that. You know, smaller gates, probably have to reduce ticket prices, or at least freeze them, at the very least. You know, the money coming in stops. You know, the cash flow reduces. It just becomes a whole lot more difficult to run a football club. And there's nothing about the Khalilis that make me think they're prepared. They're in any way prepared or ready to run a football club in the National League, let alone League Two. And I think for me, it's very worrying how they've run the football side of things. Kind of to what you said, Bradley, about, you know, they said there isn't a plan if we go down. There's almost a bit of a naivety there. Like, oh, we're not going to go down. We'll be fine. We'll just chuck loads of money at the problem in January, and we'll bring in Orsi, we'll bring in Lolos, and Scott will get his players, and everyone will be happy again. And that lasted for about 2 weeks. So for me, it's very. When you go back as well to the summer recruitment was dreadful. It left us with a squad that wasn't fit for the style of play we wanted, wasn't fit for League Two football, looks unfit, if anything. It was clear that we weren't getting our first choice targets for whatever reason, and we were bringing in players, I mean, I think the fact that we gave Dion Conroy a three-year contract and then 6 months later we're freezing him out. We're giving players like Reece Brown.
I suppose he could come back and do some managing.
I think that'd almost come out to sabotage, wouldn't it? But yeah, it's just the whole thing's a mess. There's never been I've never felt like there's been a cohesive plan. There's never been a cohesive line of thinking from the Crawley brothers.
It's a tough one because on one hand you've got managers, you've got owners that pick and choose which players the manager has to play. Then you often get the complaints from fans being like, this manager's not wanting this player, why are you buying him, blah blah blah. But then you've got the other side of the coin, which is what happened this time, where Scott's brought in exactly the players that he wants to bring in. I think there isn't really any argument about that. Then he does that, and people complain that he hasn't brought in. The owners haven't done a good job, when actually they're just supporting the manager and what he wants.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the problem as well. Is without being too controversial,
go for it.
The previous ownership, their recruitment model, I think, is a fairly open secret how their recruitment model worked, right? They spoke about it openly.
Yeah.
That recruitment model identified Lolos, It identified Orsi, all those players that came in and did that job, right? What you've then got is the recruitment in the summer was poor, and you could argue we were in the midst of a takeover, blah blah blah. You know, all of that. You know, there were players that were never given a fair shake of the tree, Shamanga, amongst others that have gone on to produce elsewhere. I think this transfer window has identified that maybe Scott's strength is not scouting and kind of player recruitment, right? Now, it's one thing to say to a manager, what do you need to build the team that you need to stay up, right? But for him to go back to Orsi, Lolos, Darcy, Kellen Gordon, all these players that were identified by the previous incarnation of Crawley Town and did a job, you know, to me, yes, it was great. It was lovely that Orsi came back. It gave a bit of a feel-good factor, all of that element. But it also feels a little bit like a kind of lazy recruitment just to kind of do that, right? You know, are there or were there better options to go into that 10 role? I mean, look, I know because Scott said to me that there was a lot of hope on Danny Cashman this season. You know, obviously he got injured. It's not worked out for him at the moment. So, you know, but again, for me, look, I'm as well as Crawley. I follow Tottenham. You know, every game I've been to this season, James Maddison's been there on the sidelines watching. I've not seen Danny Cashman at a Crawley game for months, right? So to me, it's like there's that not necessarily that unity in the group, and everyone kind of pulling in the same direction. I mean, I've literally just seen that Papadoulis has gone out on loan again this afternoon. So, you know, I don't know. I mean, look, I don't think scouting was Scott's strong point, and I guess maybe the recruitment team didn't say to him in January, these are players we think could help the team, what do you think? Instead they've said, what do you want? And he's gone, well, I want back the players that got me promoted, right? And that's a little bit like playing Football Manager and kind of chuck some stuff at the wall and see what sticks, right?
Yeah. It's just also quickly worth mentioning, and fair play to both the players, fans and owners for funding the coach or subsidising the coach to Newport County on Good Friday. Hopefully we can get good numbers. So it'll be a very, very, very important away game for us. But hopefully we can start to kick on and get those 3 points at home to Gillingham this Saturday. So hopefully if you are able to make it, you get down to Broadfield Stadium and support whoever is managing the club come Saturday.
Louie.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just tell them to go out there and have some fun. You know, the Harry Redknapp style.
I think that's. I said this earlier in our kind of group chat. I would just change it now. I would just go 4-4-2. I would have, you know, a little bit more gung ho. I think when Adiemo has played up top with, the other Adiemo has played up top with Orsi, there's been a bit more spark and a bit more liveliness. And I do think Orsi maybe at this stage needs someone to kind of feed off a little bit.
It's so strange because he led the line so well for us a couple of years ago. He was running channels. He was holding the ball up. He was bringing players into play. You know, he had Lolos and Adam Campbell playing, and it's so. I think the intention this season has been to try and recreate that, or at least a second. Mm-hmm. But when you haven't got Liam Kelly, you know, kind of playing alongside Jay Williams, it makes it a lot harder. It's very. We kind of touched on it earlier. It's been very disjointed because there's no real midfield. You know, it doesn't help with the injuries we've had. Max Anderson and Louis Copley coming in, who I figure was sort of meant to be that player kind of getting us going forward and playing on the turn and feeding the ball forward.
Even that needs some kind of looking into. Why have we got so many injuries?
It is beyond a joke. That's maybe We could probably do a whole episode on the amount of injuries we've had.
100%. I think we could probably be here all night talking about what's gone on in the past few weeks and season.
The last point I want to make. Sorry, I know we're going to be wrapping up, but the last point I want to make is that I would much rather have our fixtures than, for example, Barrow's. I mean, I think we can probably fairly safe. I mean, nothing's certain, but it looks like it's Barrow +1. So we've really only got to be better than one more team beyond that. If we're looking at just pure survival, I'd much rather have our fixtures than I looked at Barrow's fixtures the other day. They're absolutely horrendous, especially in the position they're in. So,
and thankfully, it's still in our hands.
It's still in our hands. I think people forget. I saw someone say earlier it'll take a miracle to keep us up, and I wanted to respond saying we're a point above the drop zone with 7 games to go. It's not exactly turning water into wine to keep us up, but maybe if we can turn shots into goals, it'll make it a fair bit easier. But yeah, we've got Gillingham at home, who are in pretty poor form. They're not going anywhere this season. We've got Grimsby at home, Shrewsbury at home, and Salford at home. I think we can probably win 2, if not 3 of those. At our best, if we're playing well, I'd back us against any of those teams. But
the last point I want to make is we have always been together as a team and behind our team. When we played, I think it was Harrogate at home, they had a banner out that said "In Gaffer We Trust." And then at half-time when they were losing, they filled out another banner above it that said "Sack the manager." We've never had that level of... And then they started fighting amongst themselves about who was getting their banner where. So our fan base has never kind of been that divided. And like I said at the start, and you said it as well, Lou, I think it's a sad day that Scott's gone, but it's done now, and we have to look to the future.
100%.
Yeah.
And again, it's worth reiterating, Scott. Thanks for all you did in that first season. Those memories will live with us forever.
If by any chance he is listening, and we know he has mentioned before, he's a big YouTube man, so he may stumble across us. I wouldn't be surprised, but yeah, Scott, if you are listening, then genuinely thank you very much for everything you've done, even this season, all the work you put in, and I think we can probably fairly safely speak for 99% of fans to say we'll whatever we thought was the right decision or not, we're all very kind of deeply sad that it's ended this way.
And if he ever wants to come on, he's more than welcome.
Definitely.
That would probably quite easily be our most listened to episode, I reckon.
Yeah.
Reuben,
well,
pull some strings to make it happen.
I'll do my best. So, Louie, Bradley, thanks very much for joining me this evening.
Pleasure as always.
And let's hope for some positive results going forward. So come on, you Reds.
Come on, you Reds.